Environment, Climate Emergency and Transport Committee. This meeting will be webcast and a record retained on the Council website for up to 2 years. For those at home viewing the webcast, I would like to inform you that if you look above the video, you will see a Resources tab. Select this and a link to the agenda will appear in the right-hand side. This will allow you to open the agenda in PDF form and follow the discussion and debate. Before we begin tonight, I would like to ask everyone present to join me in a minute's silence for David Amos MP, for Alderman Jerry Ellis, and for our own Andy Corkill, who was a member of this committee and who I will say a few words about afterwards. Thank you. Thank you. I would like to just briefly put on record our condolences to Andy Corkill's family and friends. Andy was a member of this committee, and I had been delighted to find out that I'd be working closely with him, as from our conversations, I knew him to be intelligent, thoughtful, kind, and deeply, deeply committed to environmental and active travel matters. He certainly had a lot to say on these issues and was not up for greenwashing or lip service. He did an excellent job as a very new councillor in holding me to account as cabinet member, and I was worried he might be a hostile and difficult presence on the council, but it was the complete opposite of that. His challenging questions were from the heart, and he met my equally heartfelt answers with such understanding and generosity that I have in fact been carrying these encounters with me all this time throughout his absence, asking myself regularly, what would Andy make of this? And would Andy approve of this? That is the kind of impact that this young man had on people and will continue to have. I will continue to think of his challenges and his support. He might not be here, but he is very much not forgotten. Thank you.
Chair, can I just associate ourselves with those comments as well? Yeah.
Thank you. I've not received any apologies for this meeting. There are no late apologies. Can I ask members to declare any interests they might have in any items on this agenda? This brings us to item 4 of the agenda, which can be found on page 1 to 10 of the agenda pack. This is the minutes of our meeting on September the 7th, 2021. Does anyone have any comments on the minutes? My only comment is that we promised in the meeting to publish the names of the councillors that had had their carbon literacy training. We were asked to do this in a question. And I just think we could add this to the minutes and then we can action this. Can I propose that we agree the minutes with this correction? Agreed. Thank you. Yes, thanks. Thank you. So this brings us to public questions and agenda item 5.1. We do have public questions, and I will ask those present to ask their questions within the 2 minutes allowed. There's no debate on public questions, and I ask questioners to stick to the question. The Council Constitution allows responses to be spoken or provided in writing. The first two questions, I believe, are from Mr. Julian Priest. Mr. Priest, would you like to ask your question?
Chair, the Save Hoylake Beach group, recently rebranded as Hoylake Beach Community, are campaigning on the basis that simple raking without the use of weed killer will give them the golden sands they expect. In a previous one of these meetings, a Hoylake and Mells Ward councillor expressed their view that neglecting the beach for a number of years until such time as the beach management plan has been approved by Natural England will result in the beach vegetation situation being irreversible. At that same meeting, a council officer responded to said councillor with the view that removal of vegetation from the beach would require bulldozing. The public Facebook group Hoylake Beach The Evidence references studies on the control of Spartina that show mechanical removal lead to a 42.8% increase in plant density in subsequently growing seasons because this grass propagates via underground rhizomes, roots, and any activity which fragments and redistributes these rhizomes, such as raking, will increase the rate at which the grass can spread when compared to doing nothing. The public Facebook group Hoylake Beach The Evidence also references scientific papers that explain how one effective treatment for controlling the vegetation is complete removal of the substrate, sand, containing these rhizomes, roots, which extend 30 to 40 centimetres underground. To eradicate vegetation from the beach, scientific evidence points to a requirement for bulldozing the foreshore and wholesale removal of huge amounts of sand to a significant depth, not simply raking the surface of the beach. My question, are the current studies fully assessing what would be required to remove and eradicate vegetation from Hoylake Beach? And an assurance, will the full impact of what is required, both environmental and financial, be explained in the public consultation so that those who expect to see golden sands with no vegetation fully understand exactly what they are asking for?
The ecological and geomorphological study is looking at the evolution of the foreshore based on historic changes and an improved understanding of the ecological communities. Predictions of future change based on climate change and management options will be considered, however. The study is not considering eradication of vegetation from Hoylake Beach. We can and should include financial implications of each option in the public consultation, as well as explaining environmental implications. Thank you for your question. Do you have another question?
Yeah, supplementary question. Chair, the recently tabled motion calling for the Director of Neighbourhoods to engage with Natural England in regards to the continued spread of Spartina grasses appears to be merely aimed to score political points and spread misinformation, fear and divisiveness in the community. Item 47, Resolution 3 of the 16th of March 2021 meeting of this committee agreed to consult with a coastal advisory group of experts who were to offer impartial apolitical advice on current and future wind-blown sand and beach management. Can the committee give an assurance that this dialogue with an expert apolitical advisory group is underway, and if not, why not? And if not yet taking place, when will this important dialogue begin?
Thank you, Mr. Priest. Officers were required by the Environment, Climate Emergency and Transport Committee to consult with the Coastal Advisory Group on the specification for movement of sand from the seawall at Hoylake ahead of undertaking an HRA and applying for assent. The Coastal Advisory Group were emailed on the 4th of August 2021. One response was received by the deadline of 23rd of August. I can only assume that the group of specialists were expecting to meet with officers and admit that this is what I had expected as chair of the committee, rather than just an email. If email is not the most appropriate or expected form of consultation, then I am sure we can arrange a meeting, even if it's virtual, to follow through with the requirements of this committee when we voted to request officers to consult with the Coastal Advisory Group. I would expect that this meeting takes place before the end of the calendar year and discusses best practice for the management of wind-blown sand. Mr. Priest, thank you. Does that answer your questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. We do have another questioner listed. In fact, another two questioners listed. Are they not present? Can I just check? We notified that they were not coming? Okay. The answer, yeah. I'll have a look and see if I can make out the questions from the preamble then. Yeah, that's great, thank you, I've got it. So I have a question from Mr. Randalls, which I'll read out and answer. So my question is, now that I've brought this potentially dangerous situation to the committee's attention, he's talking about the blocked footpath by the RNLI station. There is a dune blocking a footpath on the edge of the SSSI. Now that I've brought this potentially dangerous situation to the committee's attention, can you assure me that this matter will be given some serious consideration and have it further investigated and hopefully have it addressed soon? So the answer would be, from my point of view, thank you for your question regarding windblown sand on the footpath at the perimeter of the RNLI station at Hoylake. The Council will undertake a risk assessment, and depending upon the outcome of the risk assessment, any appropriate actions will be undertaken. We'll leave it at that because Mr. Randalls is not here. Thank you. I have another question from Dr. Turner, Dr. Jane Turner. Yeah. So again, going straight to the question. My question is, how much is the Council spending on average to deal with windblown sand now, and how much more do you anticipate needing to spend in the future? Given that the GEMIT report of 2020 has proven to be accurate in predicting the situation that we are now in with respect to beach levels and habitat changes, will all parties represented at Council undertake not to kick the can down the road again? In answer to that, thank you, Dr. Turner, for your question. Responsibility for dealing with the removal of windblown sand from all areas of Wirral Coast falls to various service areas within the Council. Parks and Countryside manage the removal of windblown sand from areas which do not form part of the adopted highway. Since April 2019, approximately £8,000 per year has been spent on managing windblown sand, and in future years this is predicted to rise to £10,000 per annum. Waste and recycling remove accumulations of windblown sand from the adopted highway. It's not possible to identify exact spend, as planned removal activities are built into the existing contract with BIFA. However, since April 2019, approximately £2,800 per annum has been spent on reactive works in addition to the planned works undertaken through the contract. A figure of £30,000 per annum is estimated for future activities. Highways remove sand from highways drainage systems on a planned and reactive basis. The approximate spend per annum is £6,000. So in total, this is £46,000 per year removing windblown sand. The Council is undertaking public engagement and consultation on the development of beach management options for Hoylake. The Council is also undertaking an ecology and geomorphology study which will consider likely future evolution of the beach under a range of management options. The preferred management option will be informed by these studies, but also by the framework set out by the discretionary advice received from Natural England and those set out by the Habitat regulations. Thank you, Dr. Turner. I think that's all questions. We've not received any petitions or statements, and we've not received any member questions.
Chair, sorry, can I just ask a point of order on the 3 questions that were submitted? It's not a comment, it's a point of order. One, that the gentleman who was here read his entire question. The other 2 weren't, even though they might be watching on the webcast. I wonder why that was. And when were the questions received? Were they received in time, please?
The questions were received in time, but we weren't notified that the questioners were not attending. There are different preparations when we know the questioners are not attending. Thank you. So this brings us to...
Chair, can I just interrupt?
Yes.
One very quick question, if I may, on the minutes of the last meeting. It was said that we were going to look to refer to Policy and Resources, the membership of the Hilbury Island Management Group. Do we know if any progress has been made on that? Because that group has not met for a long time.
Yes, that's a good question. I believe that I asked when it was going to PNR, and it's going to go to PNR for final confirmation of membership in November, I believe. November. Thanks. If there's no further questions, then we'll go to agenda item 6, which is the Street Lighting Improvement Programme Progress Report. This can be found on pages 21 to 32, and I would like to ask Simon Fox to present this report. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, this report provides an update on the major street lighting improvement programme that has been delivered over the past 2 years, and some of the matters relating to street lighting which have been the subject of recent interest from members and residents. The programme has successfully delivered significant environmental, financial, asset performance and community safety benefits. Appendix 1 to the report sets out the details of the Council's contract with its supplier, SSE, including governance and finance, progress outputs, performance and customer feedback, health and safety, energy savings and carbon reduction, and social value. The contract with SSE will be complete by the end of this calendar year, and by then it will have delivered nearly 28,000 new street lighting lanterns, nearly 10,000 new street lighting columns, meeting all monthly performance targets, and saving 1,400 tonnes of carbon, with 343 resident survey responses and a total combined £245,000 worth of social value. Chair, Appendix 1 also includes some background for committee on other issues and future initiatives relating to street lighting, including an on-street electric vehicle charging pilot scheme, which has been delivered as part of the current improvement programme, heritage lighting and plans to develop an options report for members to consider, and structural lighting, column condition and the need for further future investment in this. So the recommendation to committee is to note the contents of this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Simon. Does anybody have any comments or questions for Simon? Alan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Simon, for the report. And can I thank you and your officers for the very effective way that this programme has been implemented, and the way you have actually dealt with one or two particular issues which have arisen in my ward. They've always been most helpful. Can I, a couple of questions. Can I ask, firstly, are all the lights now LED, or is there still some further work to be done on putting more LED lanterns in, or is that phase of the work complete? And then the second part is looking at the appendix and the comment that there are 15,000 concrete columns which will need to be addressed in coming years. I presume that is going to be the subject of a fresh report, as that's clearly a matter that we're going to need to address as a committee and as a council, and that's going to have significant financial implications. Will there be sources of finance to help us make that transition to new columns? And one final thing, there have been one or two allegations that the new LED lights are harmful to some insects. Is there any evidence that you're aware of for this? Is that a matter we ought to be concerned about?
Chair, yes, I can answer. In terms of the LEDs, yes, by the end of the contract with SSE, all of our lighting will have been replaced with LED lanterns. There are a number of small isolated exceptions. An example might be West Kirby, where the street lighting infrastructure replacement is going to be part of the West Kirby Marine Lake, the West Kirby Flood Alleviation Scheme project, and one or two other areas where they're part of other capital schemes, but in general terms, yes, all the lighting should now be LED. In terms of the 15,000 concrete columns that's mentioned in at the end of the appendix there, we will be bringing a business case on a safety-related business footing to the Council's Capital and Asset Group. So it will be a request for capital funding to finance that over a 10-year period. So to put sufficient investment in to do a rolling programme of replacement. So just to provide some reassurance that the the worst condition columns have been replaced as part of this contract, and it's the future really that we're trying to deal with. Concrete as a material fails in a non-ductile way, and we want to make sure that we are safe, and the asset is safe for the public. So over a rolling programme, we will replace those old concrete columns and other cast iron columns that might still be on the network. In terms of the LED lights and harmfulness to insects, I'm afraid that's a new one to me. I'm not aware that there's any issues with LED lighting. I think there's a general perception that the LED lighting is brighter than the previous sodium equivalent, and that's not actually the case in terms of pure brightness and energy output. It makes things appear it's easier to see things with the LED lighting, so it's better for crime and disorder issues, and being able to pick out number plates and people's faces and things like that on CCTV. All that helps, and because the output is less, then I'm fairly sure that there isn't an effect on wildlife and insects, but it's certainly something I can look into if you want to begin with the specific details of any inquiries that have been raised. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Simon. Irene?
Can I just ask a question about the electric vehicle charging points? I understand they're going to be attached to the electric lights, aren't they, or something? And did I read in the report that you could charge your vehicles from your actual house? We've got some places in Wirral where there's actually no road around the properties, so they can't get their vehicles near to their properties to charge them. And also the vehicles only park on one side of the road because it's too narrow. A couple of these residents have said that they would like electric vehicles, but they don't know whether it would be practical for them. So I'd just like to know, would they be able to charge their vehicles?
Chair, so the pilot scheme that's been introduced as part of the street lighting contract is to provide, I think there's 45 in total, on-street vehicle charging points in street lighting columns that are available to any member of the public, initially on a free basis for 12 months. And the data... Sorry if you just... bit of feedback. The data on usage and cost will be used so that we can set a policy and strategy on rolling that out further. In terms of those areas where that type of charging infrastructure is suitable, then that will be dependent on whether people can park close to the curb, whether the lighting columns are near the edge of the curb, and whether those properties have got facilities to charge at their homes, which generally means whether they've got off-road parking or not. So we will look at how well this trial works and whether we can develop that further throughout the borough on a wider basis based on the data that we receive from this trial. But of course, we will not be putting these in places where people can charge easily from home, or whether it might cause issues with parking congestion, as you've referenced. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Simon. Does anybody else have any comments or questions?
Yeah.
Michael?
Thanks, Chair. Just a question, going back to the electric charging points. What is the actual cost to put them in on each per unit? Just so we know what we're talking about when we're going to, if we do a wholesale installation.
So there's obviously economies of scale. So if we did roll out across the borough, we would get much better value for money than we've got for this small trial. But we've put 45 in at a cost of over £100,000. We got some significant grant funding from government for 3/4 of that, and then we've had to provide some match funding through council capital. Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Simon. Are there any other comments or questions? No. I know that there is actually a close connection between our carbon budget and our financial budget when it comes to street lighting. Can you just confirm that they are aligned?
Yes, Chair, there's obviously carbon budget is non-financial and it's related to the amount of carbon we produce. So they are aligned, and there is that benefit of carbon reduction within the programme of moving to LEDs. And I did reference carbon budget in paragraph 4.2 of the report, and that's really the fact that we have a climate change levy to pay, and there's a small saving as a result of the LEDs, which will help fund the Salix loan, which is a government interest-free loan that's used to pay for the new LED lanterns. Thanks, Chair.
That's really good news. Thanks, Simon. And I noticed also that in addition to that, obviously that references the 60% reduction in energy use. Is that right? 60% reduction in energy use.
Yes, Chair, that's right. The 6% energy reduction is compared to the old sodium lantern equivalents. Now we've got LED.
Well, that's really useful. Thank you, Simon. I personally think this is a really interesting report and really a really positive report. It's filled with really positive things, and I'm really grateful for the hard work that the street lighting team do. And I know, as Alan referenced before, I know how much they care about their work and how responsive they are. There's a lot of good news in this report, and clearly the new lighting and the new sustainable tariff as well are having a big impact on our climate response. So if we have no further questions, can I propose that we approve the recommendation on page 21 of the agenda pack, which we simply have to note this. I'm just proposing that we note the report.
I think it's remiss, Chair. I think what we have seen is from its from its concept to actual delivery, something we've got right, and we're not very good at congratulating ourselves when we do get things right and things go well. So surely simply noting would be an underestimation of the work that's gone in, and we've seen positive comments from a number of members. Can we add to that we can congratulate the team behind this in its delivery and output? And I can only speak from personal, I was told all sorts of horror stories of what these lights would be like, and it's very difficult to be for something and people like to be against, but actually when it's delivered and the streets are safer and brighter and all the other advantages we've seen, we should congratulate ourselves when we get something right. And that's across the political spectrum. It's not any one party. It was something that we got through, we got the funding for, and we've delivered. So I would like to not note, but congratulate the team behind on the success of the project.
Thanks, Steve. I totally agree with that. I think that's a really good idea. Are we okay then to note the report with that extra addition? Vicky, is that okay?
Yes, Chair. That's fine. We'll take it that you've moved the recommendation with the additional words from Councillor Fowkes and congratulate the team behind the success of the project. And we'll take it that Councillor Fowkes has seconded that, and it's been agreed by assent. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Simon. So this brings us to agenda item 7, and I would like to invite Mike Coburn to introduce the Love Wirral strategy, which can be found on pages 33 to 54 of the agenda. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the Council's approach to environmental crime. Set out in the report is what we term as environmental crimes, the issues that we see out in the neighbourhood: littering, dog fouling, those sort of issues. Not fly tipping, that's something that's perhaps separate and is dealt with in a different way. We have been through a process, as you know, as a committee in your former guise as the scrutiny committee, looking at the enforcement policy and how we carry out enforcement crime and addressing it. And by agreement in response to your decision, we have amended the enforcement policy and developed this strategy which sets out an approach to changing behaviour, changing people's approach to antisocial behaviour in the neighbourhoods. So it's a 5-point approach that we want to present in the strategy. but basically, the issue of zero tolerance or robust or non-discretionary enforcement has gone, and we're approaching this in a discretionary way, working with people, a big focus on education and engaging with voluntary groups and others, but also, as you've made it clear to us in the past, the ability to enforce. And Mark Campbell, my colleague here, is along to present, or sorry, not to present, to answer questions on an in-house provision if that's what you want to ask questions on. So the key highlights which are set out in the summary of the report is that we are intelligence-led, so we need to know from the public, from yourselves, where, and obviously our contractors and our staff, where the issues are, and we'll put our infrastructure in the places where the intelligence suggests that. And obviously, the current structure of provision, bins and littered dog fouling, bag, board provision, that sort of stuff, was all pre-pandemic locations, most of it, and the world has changed significantly since the pandemic. So we're all aware of how popular our coast and parks have become, mainly because of the local restrictions of people. So the infrastructure that we have in place, established, has been extremely well used, and we need to, and I think that in many ways is going to continue moving forward. So we will work with the public and yourselves on intelligence for new bin schemes. We're looking at bin systems, smart bins that would require emptying less, because we know first of all their compaction, secondly they tell us when they're full. So infrastructure like that will move forward as part of this strategy. Crucially, and as it refers to in the report, we need to develop and expand on our successful Love Where You Live campaign. The Love Where You Live campaign is very much about supporting and upholding the work of volunteers, and again, committee in previous meetings have acknowledged the work of volunteers. That scheme provides people with support, equipment, and things like waste disposal where required, and we will keep pushing that forward and supporting that in this strategy. A crucial element, and again you made this clear to us, is education, using the Love Wirral campaign and brand, and getting communication out there. That, I mean, the approach of this strategy clearly is about highlighting positive behaviour. The positive behaviour is possible, that people can do what the majority of people do on the Wirral, which is behave responsibly, and that we can reduce and eradicate poor behaviour. So the brand, a communications campaign, and a number of things such as floor stenciling, etc., are very much part of that aspect of the strategy. In terms of engagement, we obviously want to engage with groups. There have been groups that have presented to committee previously. We'll work with those organisations, again, in terms of where provision goes and on the education campaign. And then finally, we will, and we do reserve the right to enforce. As a committee, you want that to see that happen when people are not prepared to change their behaviour and spoil our environment for the benefit of others. We will take that approach. And as it says in the report, our approach to that will be delivered internally. Use of our resources and our staff. That again, that was something that was that came from the former regime and the former delivery mechanism, that you wanted that delivered internally, and we've developed that as part of this strategy. So that is our approach. It's our approach now, but we want to push forward on it, and we ask that you approve this strategy. But we're happy to take questions on it before that. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Mike. Les, I know you've got a question.
Yeah, it's more of an observation than a question. First of all, I welcome the report. Obviously, since we lost the community patrol and that kind of enforcement, and of COVID as well, people have been using these sort of parks and as areas of recreation and trying to get some sort of exercise. We've had a great big problem with the Dales, because and first of all I want to thank you for your help with that, because you've been really helpful with the Dales. People think they can still walk the dogs in the Dales and leave them the muck everywhere. And of course, it's been putting people off in the Dales. We have friends of the Dales that spend a lot of time doing a lot of hard work. As you know, because it's an area of an SSI, so it's got that work has to be done during the year to be able to keep that standard up. So I want to thank you for the help, but I also want to welcome the report, because we did need to put something else in place, because this will increase if we don't sort of start to put some sort of an education program in. I agree with you, maybe the enforcement was a little bit too harsh, but I welcome the approach by putting this plan in place so that we can educate people and bring it to the highlight that these places are for their benefit and for everybody's benefit, and we've got to be responsible in the way we use them.
Thanks, Les. Did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, no, other than this is a strategy, it's the framework, if you like, the detail, the action planning, the working with local groups, the galvanising of our workforce and our contractors, that will all come from the framework.
Thanks, Mike. Alan?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. I agree with a lot of everything that Les has just said. I mean, we are blessed on Wirral by having these groups of volunteers who do such a tremendous job. The Wirral Wombles I mentioned, I think I praised them in a previous meeting. The New Brightoners I'm not so familiar with, as I'm not from this part of Wirral, but we owe a great debt of thanks to these people who take it on themselves to keep our open spaces looking so attractive. But it must be somewhat disheartening for them, because when you look at their posts on Facebook, you often see somebody who's been to clean up a particular area, they go back the next day or a few days later, and once again it's littered. So it is this business of educating the public, because we know the vast majority of people are completely responsible, but it only takes a small minority to spoil it for everyone in these matters. Just looking at the report, it's saying that the dog fouling online reports of complaints have rose 23%. So that is concerning. There's the fouling itself, then there's the habit of leaving poo bags littered all over the place. It's really depressing. I go to Trinity with Palm Grove Church in Oxton, and a couple of the women in the congregation were tidying up the grounds around the church last week, and between them they picked up 145 dog poo bags around the grounds of the church. And what on earth gets into people to think they can use church grounds as a receptacle for their dog waste? And that's one small example. So we've really got to make sure that people are educated, that they have the bins to put them in. And I would say that a lot of our bins are looking very sad and rusty and in need of replacement. And I think there's some expenditure due there to get those up to shape, and obviously identify the locations where more bins are needed. But all this report is written in the future tense, and I have to say that a lot of this is probably familiar to us. We've seen similar information before. I even recognised one or two of the pictures in the report we've got. We have had this before, and I think we need to move into the present tense and get these things implemented. And I just ask one question: has any enforcement actually taken place yet, or is that still something to come?
In terms of the behaviour, I've declared interest in a junior football coach, and my necessary bag it has various things you'd expect, including a bag of poo bags, because you need to inspect the pitch beforehand. So those sort of issues are not acceptable. We need to work at them. I hear the point taken about this is written for the future, and we need to get into present. Obviously, approving this strategy enables us to really move on that. I think one observation I'll make is that behaviour has changed with the pandemic. So I think like perhaps some of the unusual suspects in the household started walking dogs in the lockdown, and that created a suburban problem. That overnight there were dog poo problems in suburbia we need to tackle. So it is an issue. I think if we look at it, as a committee, behaviour on the way dog control, dog behaviour, dog owners' behaviour, not dog behaviour, I'll stress, has changed. If you look at the previous 10 years ago and the 10 years ago before that, it is changing, it is improving. I accept the pandemic changed matters more recently, but the strategy and all its strands, I think, with intelligence, working with groups, educating people, high profile, but then being steely and taking action where we can, I think that can work, and that's the approach that you approved as a committee to adopt. I won't steal Mark's thunder. The group, the teams exist, and they are engaging with the community. But yeah, we've highlighted antisocial behaviour to individuals, so I understand, Mark. But we haven't enforced because people have responded in an advisory way, the way that you wanted as a committee. They've corrected their behaviour. Sorry, Mark, I don't know if you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, Chair, just to support that, I think for such a simple problem, it is very complex. First of all, you've got to understand to try and enforce against a owner of a dog who fouls. You pretty much need to be there to observe that taking place to be able to challenge it. So it isn't easy. I think also we need to say that committee and council took the view that a zero tolerance approach previously was not acceptable and not palatable. So again, that adds to the complexity. What I can say is with the additional resources that have been approved, the patrol service, the extra resources are out there engaging with the staff. You know, I've got various bits of data where everybody that they've challenged who has been acting irresponsibly, they have undertaken to either pick up, clean up or take away the mess. And that's the results that we wanted as officers and you wanted as councillors. I think the comment about further engagement with responsible dog owner representatives, clubs, the volunteers who clean up, it's that people power is going to change the culture and the behaviour as we don't accept it. And I know I'm one of those many people who took a dog on during lockdown. I walk in 3 or 4 times a day, up and down Dale and all the rest of it, but I pick up when he poos, and all the people I meet walking the dogs, I have to say, do exactly the same. So there is this minority of people who think that it is right to just, throw their bags all over the place and not to take it home or take it to a receptacle with them. But we'll continue to try, and we'll report those metrics through the performance side as we go forward.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Mark. Chris?
Yes, just a few comments really. I agree with comments that people have made so far, and I'm very glad that we are, as a council, coming around to having formulated, a policy, a more discretionary, a more subtle policy towards dealing with this problem. Though I am a little concerned that, going from a zero tolerance, and I think that was rejected by a lot of the public generally because it was used very unfairly. It was concentrated on people living in a particular area, perhaps people on a lower income, perhaps with a lower educational standard and everything else. I'm concerned that the pendulum doesn't swing right the other way to virtual complete, tolerance towards this. And I think the public generally, residents, wouldn't want that. And I think perhaps they, on average, would position themselves somewhere in between the two poles on that spectrum. And I suppose what I'm concerned about really is this idea of discretion. I think unless there's a fairly clear policy as to what that means, is it sort of one warning and next time you find, or is it more subtle than that? And if it does become more subtle and more discretionary than that, there's a worry that then people will perceive it as unfair. He was given 1 warning and 3 warnings, and I was only given 1 and fine. That sort of thing. So I'm just concerned that the council officers involved in this implementation of this policy, the educational policy, which is very laudable in itself, have given thought to the practicalities of this, of the discretion. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, Chair, I think Councillor Cook makes some really good points, and this is the complexity and the difficulty with a policy that talks about 4 E's: engaging, explaining, encouraging, and enforcement as a last action. I think what I can say is that the training of those officers, the experience of them on the ground, we need to approach that in a way that I don't believe that does say, you know, 1 strike, 2 strike, 3 strike, we enforce, because I don't actually think that actually achieves what we're trying to do in terms of this. I think what we will say is that there, as will be with all of these policies, but particularly in this one, there will be a clear appeals process if somebody feels that they've been unfairly treated in that process. I can assure you, as the officer overseeing that enforcement will be a last resort, because that's what you as councillors asked us to do. And if it comes to that, I would think that the chances of an appeal being successful would be slim, because we are dealing with an evidence base that says quite clearly that we have evidence that we've engaged, explained, encouraged, and all of that has failed with that individual. And I think that's the way I'd look to approach it, really.
Thanks,
Chair, if I could just add, just very, very briefly, that the thing that overrides this strategy in the 4 E's is proportionality. So if there's something that is a particularly, impactive crime, we will fast track the strategy. So I mentioned flight tipping is not part of this, but proportionality, and I suppose that's the complexity for Mark and his team. That will be part of the approach. If there's something that we need to action, we will action.
Thanks for that. Thank you. Mike and then Helen. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Got a couple of comments, and I've also got a couple of questions. One is, I'd like to know who is the in-house enforcement team. Why are we only using in-house enforcement? Now, I'm looking specifically at 2 things. That's the litter and the dog fouling, when we have other organisations which have been trained to actually enforce those particular legislation. In some boroughs, we're talking about putting some stencils out. And in some boroughs, what they've decided, instead of having paint everywhere, they've used stencils, but they've used a jet wash to clean that pavement to actually highlight the message, and then over a period of time that then gets not washed away but then comes back. So instead of having paint everywhere, that may be an option if it's a low footfall but you want to get the message out. Between 2010 and 2014, it was seen to be very effective, and dog fouling and litter complaints dropped dramatically because we had an in-house team plus the PCSOs trained to deal with these 2 particular issues. Enforcement wasn't a last resort, it was to deal with persistent offenders. So if we have persistent offenders that are witnessed to do it and refuse to pick up, they were given a fixed penalty notice. I would hope that we actually look at that because it's going to be a minority, and it's going to be the people who aren't really going to be bothered about it. So I think we need to be looking at that. And I will say that I believe the policy of zero tolerance was actually to do with litter rather than the likes of dog fouling, and that was the previous kingdom, because they didn't issue very many fixed penalties for dog fouling. It's mainly to do with litter. I may be corrected, but that's what I believe. So there you go. That's a number of questions.
Yeah. I'll perhaps answer the last issue first. So between Mark and I will respond to some of the points. Perhaps we didn't actually highlight 1 or 2 things enough in the report because they just need to be clarified. But on your latter point, the way the Kingdom contract worked was there was no discretion. They were under instruction, so they saw something, they had to respond. That did include dog fouling. There was no, it was a zero tolerance for dog fouling. Owners not picking up. That was the issue. I mean, it was interesting. They found that difficult as well, even without the discretion. Sorry, then the first point, we probably didn't make it clear enough in the report. We will work with other partners, and it should be a joint agency approach. that will adopt. So yeah, the organisation you mentioned, Mark will know these organisations better than me, but that wasn't our intention to exclude them. They're very much part of the solution. I'll take your point about the physical stenciling and imagery that we're going to use. Some of that stuff is quite old. It needs to be refashioned, rebranded, and that's what we intend to do. And there's also new areas based on intelligence that we want to put this stuff. Sorry, Mark.
Yeah, nothing to add, Chair. I think that covers it.
Thank you. Thanks. Helen?
Just about dog fouling, I get a lot of complaints outside schools, so if you could link the education, maybe make it sort of an event when you get a new bin out, you know, outside the school, talk about, you know, collecting your dog poo and stuff like that, get the kids on board and the parents, because I've got two, you know, and there's nothing worse. I work in a school in trying to take dog poo off kids' shoes. It gets everywhere. Well, they trample it right through the school. So I don't know why it's outside schools, but maybe that is something we could focus on, you know, educating the children, hopefully the parents, and then stop the bad behaviour.
And we're aware of this issue, and sadly, a healthy minority of the problem is parents walking their kids with dogs to schools. That's what we found to be at least part of the problem. So you're right, education of the, through the children, through our eco-school structure, you know, we've got that. We've got a good in on most of our schools. 50 have got green flags, over 100 are eco-schools. So the eco-schools officer, we can do that. We can do campaigns we've done in the past. We probably need to relaunch that again, but there is a structure we can use, and we should use it, and there is a problem outside schools. Agreed.
Chair, if I may, just in addition to that, I think it would be we are looking at other alternative technologies to support us in this. So I think I've spoke to this committee previously, where the stance of the Surveillance Commissioner has been to use public realm CCTV cameras for low-level environmental crime is a sledgehammer to crack a nut. The new Surveillance Commissioner is very keen to say if there are persistent offenders and you have CCTV footage that covers those areas, then that can be used in evidence to support your activity. So we've invested heavily in our CCTV room and our CCTV camera network. I can't sit here and say to all of you councillors that every school entrance is covered by a CCTV camera at this moment in time. That may be certainly an ambition, and actually we will start to use that, and actually using some of that evidence that's gathered there when we do have persistent offenders, to lay that in front of them and say, well, this is you doing it, and actually that's not acceptable, and that could be used to support that enforcement activity. It is a step we haven't used before, because we've been advised by the Commissioner that wouldn't be acceptable. A new Commissioner, a new view, and we should be using the technology that we've invested in for all crime, I would suggest.
As chair of governors of a school that has got CCTV outside, and you know, I had to walk through on Monday morning and children were covered in dog poo, I would welcome that, and we would be very supportive in our school.
Yeah, and I think, sorry, Chair, without going too much, I think the important bit here is, I think once you've done one or two cases using that technology, that again will have that added effect that actually people will see and start to bring behaviour change.
Chair, just going to make a quick comment. Just saying, with that, whether the school or those areas have got CCTV cameras or not, what we can do also is use signage to say, you are being looked at, pick it up. That would help.
Mike. Sorry, just to clarify, Mark's the technical guy on this one, but the signage is needed to warn people. We have to do that anyway, so the signage would have to be up to saying there is CCTV coverage happening in this area, so that will be part of the approach.
Thanks, Mike. That's particularly interesting about the change of rules about the use of CCTV, because I know that we've got a number of low-level persistent issues in various parts of the borough, and so that's really, really interesting and very positive move.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, just for clarity, it's probably a change in interpretation from the new commissioner rather than a change in the legislation. I think the legislation's always been there. It's just we've been advised that that wouldn't be something that we would should be using it for.
That's great. Thanks, Mark. Are there any other comments or questions? Right, Steve next, I think, and then Mike.
I think we also have to be imaginative, maybe, in how we empower and who we empower. I've mentioned it at previous committees. We seem to have a large number of people doing traffic enforcement in and around schools where we've concentrated the efforts on. But it's part of as I understand it now, a private contract. But if, say, we had an in-house contract that covered everything, this idea of, we've had debates before about this universal person, a street ranger type description, so they enforce parking, dog litter, they report street lights, that's the type of, but that's not going to happen overnight. And certainly, if we're all being realistic with ourselves, we have not got a shed load of money to put into this part of the budget, and that's the reality of the budget situation we're in. So at the moment, the strategy is aimed on educating people, very much so, to stop it at root cause. So if you stop littering, then we stop paying for it and we don't have to do it. So that's where we are in the reality of the situation. But I think we need to get together and think more imaginatively about how we can tackle what is a number, not number one concern, but it's high on the priority of our citizens. And, as we've always said, perception is everything. If they perceive it's getting worse, then it probably is getting worse, and that's where we're from. So, and just, it's not a difficult message to get across. I'm dog minding at the moment. My pockets are full of these bags, okay? And then I pick it up and I put it in a bin. It ain't a difficult message for anyone to understand, and we have to be consistent with that message. Just do the right thing on behalf of the Wirral.
Thanks, Steve. Mike?
Yeah, thanks. I was actually talking to a school about our traffic issues that we have, and it's just come to me now. What they were doing, they had a bit of a school council when they caught speeders outside schools, and they had a choice either to take a speeding ticket or actually go and explain their reasons to the children who are like a children's court. And that actually has worked very effectively outside some schools. And it may be something, thinking outside the box, of how we can deal with those sort of offenders. So it's just another method that we can look at to do. I think it'd be quite good to actually see. And then the children are taking ownership of the area and everything else. So it's just something that I say was just come to me when we talked about speeding. It came to my head that we could possibly look at doing something like that. We could also look at additional bylaws, because there's a couple of boroughs which, over the last few years, have put in bylaws about if you're not carrying a poo bag, there is potential for enforcement there. And that's, if you've got a dog, I've got a dog, well, if you can call it a dog, my daughter's got a dog, we walk the dog, and there's poo bags coming out, as you say, in every coat that we've got poo bags coming out of our pockets, and that, we can prove that we've got poo bags. So the thing is, again, encouraging those people who aren't going to do it, listen, you are going to be financially received, because you're going to have financial implication because you're not following what the general good dog walkers do. But yeah, thanks for that.
Some good ideas there. Thanks, Mike. We noted those down.
Yeah, all noted. The latter point is controversial, because obviously show us your bags. It was an element of the approach that was looked at as part of the kingdom. So that is very difficult, and you'll find there's a small minority of authorities that have made that work. But yeah, it's an idea we'll look at. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. I just want to repeat our thanks. I think Alan mentioned it before, to the volunteers that help keep Wirral safe and clean. This is a really good report. It's got lots of good ideas. It's about the strategy, so obviously it can evolve over time and be tweaked. But we still depend quite considerably on the work of volunteers who are out every day keeping Wirral cleaner and safer because of it. And so, yeah, I echo again our thanks for that. And the idea that since COVID, waste removal has gone up by 50% is really quite shocking. And it's really remarkable and a credit to the teams, to the volunteers and to the council teams that we're not actually wading knee deep in litter. It's really quite remarkable just how much waste we have to remove and how expensive that is. So it is worth really taking it very seriously. I know that the very, very serious issue of fly tipping is dealt with separately. It's not part of this strategy because we go straight to enforcement with fly tipping. Can you confirm, Mike, that we are working on our response to fly tipping in the light of recent events?
Yeah, we, as a council, the Waste Environment team, we have sophisticated equipment, covert surveillance equipment. We need magistrate approval to use, which we do. And we've invested in it. We've got state-of-the-art equipment that's very dynamic, flexible. We can put it in the right places where there's intelligence that we can survey something. Obviously, with the pandemic and during that period, that was difficult to use, and there was a cessation of that. That's now back in operation, and there are several locations where this equipment is working now. So obviously, I can't divulge where that is, but we're looking at a number of sites across the borough, south, east, north. And also we work with our partners like the Environment Agency. There's a significant fly tip we're all aware of, the M53. That has been dealt with. We understand that the Environment Agency's investigations are at an advanced stage. With that, I can't say any more than that at this stage. And that it's a considerable amount of waste that's accumulated there. It's been the clearance job on that starts tomorrow. So we work with partners on industrial criminal levels, and we have our own equipment and resources to deal with that stuff, you know, that ends on in a country road or in an isolated, vulnerable location. We're monitoring those now.
Thanks, Mike. That's really, really good to hear. If there's no other questions, can I propose that we agree the recommendations? And the recommendations are that we approve the Love Wirral strategy and that we receive regular progress updates on the delivery of this strategy.
Chair, could I suggest, like on the last motion, that we actually have an addition where we express our appreciation and thanks to the voluntary groups that you and I have both referred to? I'm sure we'd all want to do that.
I think that's a good idea. There are quite a lot of them.
Send them an email then.
Can I just say also, as someone who does litter picking, the council team behind that, you know, supplying the pickers, you've got a really streamlined system there. You know, I can pick in Upton Park, I can pick up at Liso, and the next day, like a magician, it's all gone, all the bags are gone, and that happens on a regular occasion. You know, I know all the volunteers say that, you know, there's just no problem at all. We collect the litter and it's gone, and it keeps the streets clean, because that was my first initial concern. You know, we're all picking all kinds of stuff up, but how quick can you respond to it? And it's so streamlined and so responsive. I'd like to congratulate you on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And just in terms of the suggestion from Councillor Brahim, sorry, there is a framework. There is a contact point for people like the Wirral Wombles and New Brightness, etc. So we can use that structure to do what you want to do. We've got the contacts.
Thanks, Mike. I did actually have, after we were going to approve the recommendations, I did say I was going to ask Mike to pass on our thanks to Claire and the team for not just writing the report and all the work that's gone into this strategy, but also for all the hidden work that goes into enabling all that volunteering and the collection. So there are some really hard-working officers behind this. So yes, I echo that. Thank you. So have we... Yeah.
I think the chair moved the matter, members, and I'm just checking. Is Councillor Brahim seconding it with? Yes. Thank you.
Thanks, Vicky. So, just like to thank everybody for that. Thank you. That takes us to item 8 on the agenda, which is pages 55 to 68, and I'd like to invite Nikki Butterworth to present the Wirral Plan draft delivery plans. Thanks, Nikki.
Thank you, Chair. So this report presents the Wirral Plan 21 to 26 draft delivery plans, and the Wirral Plan 21 to 26 was agreed at Council on the 6th of September this year. The Council also agreed the draft delivery plans that sit underneath the plan, and these give more details about the 5 themes and also the specific actions we will take in the coming years to deliver under those themes. The Council recommended that these delivery plans should be referred to committees for further consideration and for final comment and input. Officers will bring updates on these priorities to committees to show the progress and the developments on the delivery plans. So just to note, the report recommends the committee is asked to consider the draft delivery plan set out in Appendix 1 and also to agree the specific thematic priorities within the remit of this committee. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Nikki. Do we have any questions or comments about this draft delivery plan?
Well, yes, Chair, if I could just
Alan.
jump in. I'm delighted to see the reference to the planting of the 21,000 trees per year over the next 10 years. It's a wonderful initiative. I'm loath to put a burden on officers, but I think it's quite important to understand how many of these trees are surviving and thriving. It's great to see the ones that are established and beginning to make their mark on the landscape, but I am conscious there's a lot of them, for one reason or another, don't flourish, and we might end up with a slightly artificial number. It's all very well saying, yes, we planted 21,000 trees, but only 15,000 of them have survived. I mean, it would be useful to know what impact we're having on longer term on trees that actually become established.
Thanks, Alan. I have actually asked this, and the survival rate actually surprised me because I wasn't expecting the survival rate to be quite as good as it is, but it is being monitored, isn't it, Mike?
Yeah, very closely, and what we need to do, I'm sure, for the work programme is the new or newish tree landscape manager, Nicola Wallback, we invited to committee and provided with an update. We're just on the cusp of the effectively planting season 2, starts next month and will run through to March. 21,000 trees is the target, and with her role, with her dedicated approach to this, we know there's now a plan, there's now a community engagement policy about how people get involved. There's lots of events which we will promote through yourselves. But one of the things that Nicola is responsible for is monitoring survival rates, etc. And as Councillor Gray said, that it is high. You know, the post-planting watering and nurturing, involving volunteers in that as well, is a key aspect. But yeah, with a fair wind by the end of March, we hope around 50,000 trees planted in 2 years. That's the aim. And the 210,000 trees in 10 years is net of disease and failure rate. So we're looking for those trees to flourish.
Thanks, Mike. Do we have any other comments, Mike?
Thanks, Chair. You stole my thunder. I was going to ask that question. That's great. How are areas allocated for these trees to be planted is one of the questions. The other question is I'm getting a lot of contact from residents who've had trees being cut down due to disease and what have you, or in my case outside the house, fallen down through wind. Are they going to be replaced? And what are we doing with the stumps? Because they're so unsightly, and the thing is that they can actually be a tripping hazard for our residents. Are the stumps going to be looked at and removed, and are they going to be replaced?
Okay, so in terms of the planting programme, this year, which obviously, as I just said, it's our second planting season, the real focus is on the council's own estate. So we're planting trees on our own estate, schools, parkland, asset land, etc. So that's the majority of our planting is focused on those sort of areas across the borough. We have been successful, so we're waiting for confirmation of another round of Urban Tree Challenge Fund allocation. That, as its name implies, is street trees in densely populated areas, so we're waiting for confirmation for that. In terms of street trees that are felled or diseased or damaged, we can't replace all of them like for like. Obviously, there's an issue about rimming out the stumps, etc. But we have changed the approach to the so-called adopted tree. So if people are interested in a tree outside their house, etc., the previous arrangement was that they paid for that. Well, the climate emergency budget now subsidises that. So people who are interested in trees outside their property, etc., we fund that. We're looking at all ways to do this. So there will be an incentive for the garden waste subscription, and also something called a Tree for Life scheme, which is to celebrate any form of life. Is another scheme that we're launching on that. So a whole range of issues and initiatives have been pushed by Nicola Wallbank, and residents can get involved in that. We can't promise that we can replace every tree, it's like for like, as you mentioned, the stumps, etc. But that will be part of the strategy moving forward.
Just one additional on that. So you talked about the adopted tree. Actually, we're now subsidising it. So I will be asked this question now: is how much would it cost them to actually adopt a tree or have a tree placed outside the house?
So we fund the council and climate emergency budget linked to our carbon capture issues. We cover that cost.
Thanks, Mike. Helen?
Another good officer, Nicola, she'll come out to you, she'll talk to you. You can have a resident who wants a tree can have a tree, or if you want to make it as a community activity, she'll do that as well. So it is honestly, I've got people who want trees outside on grass verges outside the houses to stop people parking on the curbs. And so instead of putting on white stones, you can have a tree instead, and no one's going to park on top of a tree, are they? So you can have different types of trees as well. So contact Nicola, she's boss. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen, and I agree with that.
Thank you. Nikki, are you happy that you have the resources within your directorate to deliver this on time?
Yes, we're at full capacity now with that tree team, and they're excellent officers, and I think we've got a really good, strong action plan to deliver. So we have resourced the team to deliver the action plan, and we do have, we were successful in that, the Urban Tree Challenge Fund as well, which we've match funded, which is really helpful, and we wait with bated breath for the next round. So yeah, we're all systems go, really.
Thank you. In terms of the whole delivery plan, I'd like to thank everybody involved. There's a lot of officers involved in this, and it was put together, I believe, by Rosie, put the whole thing together. So I just want to thank all the officers involved for such a detailed and collaborative piece of work, because we've faffed around and changed it quite considerably, and I think it's a really good final product, and I just really appreciate the collaborative working on this. If there's no more questions or comments, can I propose that we approve the recommendations on page 55 of the agenda pack? Thank you. So this leads us to item 9, the Environment and Climate Emergency and Transport Performance Report, which is found on page 69 to page 100. And again, Nikki will be presenting this. Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a performance report in relation to the areas of environment, climate emergency, highways and infrastructure. And the report was designed based on discussions with members through the working group earlier this year during 2021, and members' requests have been incorporated into this first report. You can see from the design and the layout, it's built on a dashboard design, taking into account feedback from members requesting performance information be illustrated in a more visual way, and also from the really positive feedback we had from the dashboards we developed through the Wirral's response to the COVID pandemic, which I know members were very supportive of in terms of receiving, and the dashboard layout. So the committee is recommended to note the content of report and highlight any areas of performance requiring further clarification or action. And just picking up on Councillor Braham's point about the survival rate of the trees, for example. There's no problem with us being able to put that percentage in the next iteration of the dashboard. So, we'll take on board any of those sort of performance data and statistics that we think we can include in the dashboards for moving forward. And our recommendation would be that we bring the dashboards quarterly to allow for that trend and analysis to build. Thank you.
Thanks, Nikki. Are there any comments or questions about this?
Chair, I've got one very short question. On the page about people killed and seriously injured on the road, on the left-hand side it says cycling stages per person increased by 23%. I don't quite know what that means. Could you unpick that for me?
Simon, could you help with that one, please?
Yeah, sorry, which page are you looking at there, Councillor Brown?
It's number, but it said Wirral, people killed and seriously injured on the road. It's a good way through the report.
Okay, yeah.
Cycling stages and walking. Sorry. Cycling stages and walking stages. I'm not quite sure what that means.
Page 97.
I think it's the KSI data with the two blue boxes on the top left, is it? With the 105 and the 1180? Yeah.
You can get back to me after the meeting.
I think I might have to, yeah. I'm not sure what the stages refers to. I'm assuming that's incidents rather than stages. Or, but I can certainly ask. It's probably an accident statistics data term, which I'm not familiar with, but I'll get back to you after the meeting if that's okay. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Mike. You had a question?
Yeah, we note that the business mileage has gone up by 15%. The Teams chats have gone down by 4% and 6%. I understand that we're trying to get back to a more office-based, I presume, system, but it's proved it over the last 18 months that actually working as we've worked remotely with Teams and everything else, is there any way that we're looking at encouraging that to continue? I went into Cheshire Lines to pick this one up, and I noticed we had a lot of desks there, but they were, I'd say, 80% were empty. So does that mean the rest of the staff were still working from home? If that's the case, why have we increased our mileage by 15% if there's still a lot of staff working from home?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, this is obviously a fundamental aspect of our Environment and Climate Emergency Action Plan, which you're all familiar with, and the commitments we've made to it. So the unforeseen benefits of the enforced lockdown, and everything from printing, unnecessary journeys, the size of our estate, the use of Teams. We couldn't get traction on that prior to the pandemic. All of us as members and officers, we dealt with that quickly when we needed to. The fundamentals for the recovery plan and the way forward is that we ensure that the benefits of the enforced lockdown are continued. So there will be some backflow in terms of normal operation, people needing to get around the borough more, etc. So the graphs, I'm looking at those graphs and the little flicks at the end. We need to monitor those very closely. But of course, as a committee, as a team, we need to be equipping people with alternative mode of transport, and we're looking at that, and basically keeping a grip on things like business mileage, etc. Teams for meetings with partners and joint agency surely is the way forward. Rather than 12 individual agencies attending a meeting in a community centre to talk about clients, those should be a thing of the past, and that they are key elements of the recovery plan going forward.
Thanks, Mike. Another one.
I'd actually like to say thank you to Manco Ed. There's a carry-out tree works within a specified time frame, and it's got down as 85%, and the target is 90%. What I would have to say, there was a serious issue outside in my road, and the tree literally fell down through rot, and they were there within such a short space of time. So they were there within an hour, which is fantastic, and they did the work. So from a personal point of view, I'd like to say thank you. So I will say that may be slightly misleading, because I know they're out there very, very quickly, especially if there's a safety issue. That's the main concern. There was a safety issue, and they were there, and I can't fault them on what they did.
Thanks, Mike. Chris, did you
Sorry,
want to say
Chair,
something?
could I just
sorry.
point, just in response to Councillor Collins, next committee we have an update on the tree maintenance and inspection contract and regime. So the tree inspection manager has written a report that's coming to the November report committee. Sorry.
Thanks, Mike. Chris?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yeah, first of all, I'd just like to comment on how much more accessible the presentation through the dashboard is of all these various, facts and figures and statistics. I must say it's speeded up my working through the committee report this time. So I'm sure we'll continue that, and it's very beneficial. Having said that, I may well have misinterpreted one or two of the figures, and if in my comments now that comes across, feel free to correct me. But on page 79 of the dashboard, it's got various sources of CO2 emissions, and there are 5 green. That's good, isn't it? Where it's gone down over time, over 2019, yeah. And then there's a red one, which is CO2 emissions from transport. So I just wanted to point out really the fact that people keep saying, don't they, that people get more cars despite everything else on the whole going forward in terms of tackling the environment problems and so on, climate emergency. There is still a tendency for people to get more cars and various other forms of transport. Have I interpreted that correctly from that red bit? 439.1, which is a 0.5% increase in CO2 emissions from transport. I believe that is right, isn't it? And I just wanted to allow that point to jumping down to another issue well, it goes back to, I think it's page 97 with KSIs, killed and serious injuries. The fact that I think the statistics show there fairly clearly that whereas only 25% of the people seriously injured or killed in traffic accidents are motorists, it is motorists who cause the vast majority of serious injuries, which is, I see it as a moral imperative for everybody to consider not driving wherever they can, not just for environmental reasons, but for roads. It's almost like it is a moral issue ultimately, that we should just not use our cars if there's an alternative, even if it's a tiny bit more inconvenient, like me getting the bus and train here today and missing the first bus and nearly arriving late. So I just thought I'd make that point. I have a few other points, but I'd like other members to work through their questions and comments, and I'll perhaps come back to a few later. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Simon?
Chair, thank you. It's not really to address Councillor Cook's comments. It's more I've figured out for Councillor Brain what the figure stages means, and I think it's just a bit of context in the narrative there on the left-hand side, which is basically pointing out that whilst other modes of transport decreased in 2020 for obvious reasons, cycling went up by 23% and walking by 16%. So I think it's just setting that context and so that people are aware of why there might be differences in the figures. Thank you, Chair.
Well, the more cycling, the better.
Thanks, Simon. I'm also looking at page 76, the carbon budget baseline. It looks like we are now expecting to do a lot better than we initially thought was possible. Can I just check that is correct, Mike? And is it probably due to COVID? Thanks.
Yeah, that's correct. So basically, the baseline and trajectories that we forecast previously have been accelerated because of the enforced changes by the lockdown. And as I said in the previous round of questions, the challenge to us is to make sure the benefits of that are locked into the recovery plan. but that is the case.
Thanks, Mike. Also, it's perhaps one for Mark, but it's not really a question actually. It's more of a statement. I think it is good to see road safety in this performance data. This performance data is, I agree, it's really useful to see a dashboard version of data, and I'm hoping we can see, in terms of road safety, I note with sadness, I note the figures on cycling KSIs, and I appreciate the link with increased cycling. I'm hoping that we can see positive changes in that in the future as we work through the community safety strategy, which is a really positive strategy. So as that progresses, I'm hoping that there'll be positive changes there. And it reinforces, from what I'm hearing, it reinforces everyone's determination to see more and better cycling infrastructure as soon as possible. And I'm hoping that the government will provide the funding to enable us to do that. I know that we've had feedback from Sustrans that are the cycling and walking campaign group and charity, that our officers in the highways design team were the most engaged and enthusiastic that they have trained recently, and that they were very impressed during the training session. And I think that's really important to note. I think that we've got all the right ingredients and we've got the right attitude, and we all want these improvements. We just really need the funding, basically. We need the funding to come through to enable all these good people to be able to do that good work. And yes, just to go back to the actual dashboard itself, I'm very hopeful that we can continue to use this and that it will make reading the reports easier. We work with Nikki and the team to make sure that we get the information that we want and presented like this. It's very hopeful. So I'm really grateful that Nikki and the team have worked so hard on this. Does anybody else have anything to add? No? So if there's no further questions, can I propose that we approve the recommendations on page 69 of the agenda pack? Thank you. Is that everybody? Yep. Thank you. And finally, we're at the work programme, which is pages 101 to 108. And it's great to note that active travel's in the work programme. I'm sure people are aware that there's been an agreement between the chairs of Environment, Climate, Emergency and Transport Committee and Economy, Regeneration and Development Committee regarding active travel, and that this has been approved at PNR. And I look forward to working with all of you on active travel items in the future. I understand that the working group or workshop promised to Councillor Gilchrist at full council is to follow the pollinators update at the November committee. Is that right?
That's correct, Chair. We're presenting a report at the next committee with a review of the pilots that took place this spring and summer, and take things from there.
That's great. That's brilliant. Does anyone else have any questions, observations or requests regarding the work programme? Okay, I propose then that we agree the recommendations on page 101. Thank you. Thanks. So that brings us to the end of the meeting, and I just want to thank all members for their contributions and positivity this evening, and to thank all the officers for the hard work that goes into producing these reports, presenting the reports, and also in setting up and maintaining these meetings. So thank you, everybody.